Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 17th of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. The easiest way to do that, if you have a phone or if you jump on the internet, www.arh.noaa.gov. That's weather.gov/Alaska for short. And you can always go to weather.gov/Fairbanks/Anchorage or /Juneau and localize your information a little bit more. We're going to be talking about that a lot more in the next couple months as some of our websites are going to start to change a little bit, and it's going to be interesting and to help you find that information there and discover the new ways to look at that there. So make sure you're writing those websites down. If you use the web, again, weather.gov is the best place to start. Click on Alaska and that'll take you to the places you want to go. The weather info line at 800-472-0391 is available, of course, anytime. And as you're dialing through those numbers and selecting the places you want to hear about, write those numbers down. You don't have to wait for the voice prompt every time. Just click, 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 and off you go. Of course, during the day, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And the thing I always love to tell you about is the daily afternoon map briefings in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock or so. You'll get a sneak peek at what we're going to talk about here in Alaska weather. That's on the NWS Anchorage YouTube channel. But after this show, a little bit later, say you have a little bit of a late arrival back into port, or perhaps the airplane's a little slower to get home than you thought it would be, and you missed the show, no big deal. Our partner here at Alaska Public, hey, I can stand right in front of this guy. Our partner here at Alaska Public captures the entire thing and puts it on YouTube for you. Just search for AKwx TV. Now, our pseudo Bill Nye guy here wants to remind you that on March 30, the tsunami warning system test for the state of Alaska, with the help from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service, that's us, is practicing our tsunami warning system. We're going to set it off, and we're going to make sure it works in your neighborhood. And if it doesn't, then your job is to let us know that. Now, if you're in the interior of Alaska, you're probably not going to get the test. But if you're in Sand Point, or if you're in Southeast, or if you're in South Central, and Homer, and Soldotna, you're probably going to hear this test in some way, shape, or form. It may crawl across your screen. You'll probably hear it on the radio, or the sirens might go off. No matter what happens, it's a great time to practice what you would do in a real tsunami warning. That's going to happen on Wednesday, March 30, 10:15 in the morning. Again, chill, it's just a drill, but it's a really important one, and one that we hope you and your community take seriously. So find out what your community is doing if you're in a tsunami-prone zone along the coast, especially in southern Alaska. Now, no warnings, watches, or advisories for tsunamis right now. However, we do have winter storm warnings for the eastern Tanana Valley, as well as the Deltana and Tanana Flats region in the eastern Alaska Range, as well as the upper flats there, as well as the 40-mile country. We're talking about snow, and if you look at the satellite picture with me in a minute, you're going to see this nice blossoming area of weather that moves from about south central, where it was snowing just a little bit yesterday, to the areas in the upper Tanana Valley, where it's probably going to snow a lot more starting tonight, but really picking up as we go through Friday, and some of that could last into Saturday. And if you're looking for a good foot and a half of snow, you might find it out there, especially if you're driving east from North Pole and Fairbanks out toward Eagle or Northway or Tote. So what can you expect? Winter storm warnings are here in red, and that does include areas around Eagle and Northway, and especially east of the Delta Junction area. The winter storm warnings are in effect for the region, again, east of Fairbanks and the eastern Alaska Range. Up here around Eagle and Northway and east of Fairbanks, you could see 12 to 18 inches of snow. Looking at about 8 to 12 inches of snow for areas in the eastern Alaska Range, generally from Chicken and south. and then a winter weather advisory for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, generally east of Delta Junction. Again, 4 to 7 inches of snow possible in that area. So quite a bit going on there, but it does look like snow is going to start up. That will start again tomorrow. By Friday night, it could be heavy in some places. And as we go ahead into Saturday, there could be a good foot to foot and a half in some parts of areas closer to the Alcan border and generally east of Fairbanks and Denali. So plan accordingly and be careful with that fresh snow, as conditions are kind of moving into that spring zone now, where wet snow on top of previous snow conditions and warming and melting and sliding could make for somewhat dangerous and changing avalanche conditions. So know where you're going, make sure you let other people know where you're going, and make sure you've got your safety gear with you, including your beacon. So be safe out there. Here is a look at satellite picture. Now, what we're seeing across most of the state today is cold and dry air. But remember how I said we'd be able to see kind of this lifted area of clouds moving across south central? Watch where it's going. This is all lifting northward. All this is warm and wet air, and it's trying to run over that cold and dry air that's sitting right in place. And all this is going to spread out here. This area of divergence is what we call it when you're, say you're moving down a river and you run into kind of a lower flat area and it kind of spreads out. Well, in weather situations, that spreading also adds lift, and it helps to build the cloud cover and really get precipitation possibilities going. And in severe weatherland down in the lower 48, this would be a pretty good precursor for kind of a growing of shower and thunderstorm areas across a broad area. In our case, it's going to make snow from Anchorage to Northway out toward Dawson and then east of Fairbanks and over the eastern Alaska range. But wait, there's more. Out across the eastern Gulf, we have drier weather here moving up across southeast. A little bit of a break in the clouds for you. Look at this, just spotty hit and miss clouds, partly to mostly cloudy conditions today from areas north of Ketchikan to Juneau. A little more cloud cover around Haines and Skagway to Yakutat, and there were a few pockets of showers there, but by and large, a nice dry day for you. Warm air is lifting northward, and it's sloshing that warm and wet air up against the Alaska Peninsula all the way to Unalaska. There's still more. High pressure is building up across the Chukchi Sea, and this one looks to be a little bit stronger. If you watched yesterday, we talked about this. 1050 on the barometer is kind of a special mark for aviators. That's when the altimeter doesn't work quite as well as it should and might give you a bad reading, and worse, it could direct you into the ground. So you have to be really careful when the pressure starts to creep up there around 1050. So we're going to mark that in red when you see the surface chart in just a little bit. But what that means is there is a very large area of cold, dry, and stable air, and it's starting to wobble its way around toward the northwest coast. Well, pieces of that typically break off and start to move, and when they do move, they go wherever they want because it's a big wedge of cold, dry, dense air. And it looks like that's going to work its way over here toward the Chukchi Seacoast and send a wave down the west coast of Alaska as we head into the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So if you're in southwest Alaska and you're saying, yeah, it's already cold and dry, well, it's going to get colder and it will probably be windier and it's still going to be dry. It doesn't look like there's a big precipitation chance coming in the form of snow, but watch the weather map here and watch the forecast for the western part of Alaska, especially Norton Sound, Nome, all the way out toward Bethel and Amonuk and southwest Bristol Bay. Things are going to change there as the temperature drops. One thing that I'm watching along with the sea ice desk is probably some more growth or return of ice across the Bristol Bay region thanks to temperatures dropping and making those conditions a little more favorable for ice to return. Now, is it going to take the whole ice edge and drop it southward? It's yet to be seen, but conditions will be getting colder and more favorable for that ice to at least extend southward just a little bit. Now, north of Shemya, you can also see another curl in the satellite picture. This long sweeping trail leads up along a frontal boundary that is moving eastward but is dying fairly quickly there. You can see how it's moving more west against that flow coming in across the Aleutians and out of the North Pacific. So that system is dying and will be replaced by something else, of course, as we head toward the weekend. Here's a look at the surface map now. Low pressure out across the western bearings at 992 millibars. All of this is falling apart. High pressure, the big one, 1,043 millibars now, still growing. You'll see that increasing tonight. But here's the ridge extending southward. All of this is ice, all of this is open water, and all of this looks to be low stratus and fog. We've got some pockets of rain around Kodiak and around Sand Point. We have our stationary boundary. That's the warmer air trying to lift north, the colder air trying to drop south, and no one's really winning. And along that boundary is where we get precipitation and clouds. And in this case, we have seen some snow up against the mountains today, and certainly more to come for parts of the eastern interior. Also some light snow across the Arctic coast. And boy, is it cold there. Chances are things are going to stay cold there for the next couple of days. Now, high pressure up across the Chukchi Sea tonight should drop to about 1,050 millibars. That's that big mark I was telling you about. The big picture is it's cold. It's really cold. In fact, the North Slope saw temperatures today anywhere from 10 to 20 below again. And we're looking for that big cold to stay entrenched, and parts of that will start dropping southward. In the meantime, low pressure is working back across the central and western chain. We've got a very broad area of low pressure across the Gulf, and all of this is getting stirred up here, so it's not really focused in any one area with a big surge of wet or cold weather. But it is pushed enough moisture into Prince William Sound and the northern parts of southeast to create a better chance for rain and rain mixed with snow at higher elevations. It's also setting the stage for snow to form across the eastern interior, east of Fairbanks and north of the Alaska Range. And there it is on Friday. There will be some heavy areas of snow, it looks like, for the 40-mile country and areas south of Chicken and east of Delta Junction. Plan for snow if your travels take you east from Fairbanks or north to Fairbanks from South Central, or perhaps out toward Glen Allen and northward. You're going to run into accumulating snow, and conditions will be changing from tonight into tomorrow, so plan accordingly. All of this weather is working its way west and south, and you can see the drier effects it's having in places like the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and the YK Delta. And as we get into Friday, this tells me that we've got colder air working westward into the Bering Sea. A cold front is indicated its direction of travel with the pointed barbs here. In this case, it's moving that way. And this tells me that there is colder air behind this blue line, and there's another wave forming right here. On top of that, the winds are going to pick up across the Brooks Range, and I suspect across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, maybe the middle Yukon Valley and the northwest coast and Chukchi Sea. So plan on some lowered visibility possibilities there as you have some snow on the ground. And that could change, not to mention it's just going to be colder. So watch for that. In the meantime, for South Central, we're watching for snow. It looks like there could be another opportunity for the snow trolls to come back out across South Central and let us know that springtime is here and winter is still holding on at least a little bit there. Rain showers back in the forecast for southeast for Saturday as well. So a lot of things going on as we head into the weekend. In the meantime, let's talk temperatures there for southeast. Places like Hyder today and areas around Craig and Klawock made it up above 50 degrees. 39 as you head out toward Juneau. Temperatures around Haines and Skagway saw temps in the lower to mid 40s. Yakutat was 39. Prince William Sound saw temps creeping up on 40 this afternoon. 28 in Anchorage, 36 in Homer, 12 in Fairbanks this afternoon. Eagle had 17. Fort Yukon was 10, 5 in Arctic Village. And look at the cold across the Arctic coast. That's just a taste of what that high pressure system up across the Chukchi Sea is capable of. There is going to be cold dropping southward, and it won't be that serious and that kind of cold, but it is certainly got something to write home about there, with temps holding around 20 below this afternoon for Wainwright. 10 above in Nome as more and more mushers continue to wrap up the end of the race. 15 in McGrath today, 16 in Bethel, 14 for Nunivak Island, 9 above in Savunga and St. Lawrence Island, low 30s for the Pribilofs, 30s and even some 40s in the Alaska Peninsula today, 39 in Kodiak, 34 for Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and 41 in Atka, while it was only 37 in Adak. Overnight low temperatures for Fairbanks could be pretty cold tonight, down to about 10 to 15 below there, as you've still got dry air in place, but look where the warm and wet air is. Temperatures showing there in the teens, indicating that for you. 28 in Cordova, lower to mid 30s for southeast, 35 in Kodiak, 20s and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Dillingham and King Salmon both in the teens tonight, 12 for Nunivak Island, 27 in St. Paul, and Nome down to 6 below, 19 in Barrow, 19 below that is, 8 below for a high temperature tomorrow. Back in the mid-teens for Fairbanks, and getting a little milder for Eagle and Northway as that warm and wet air tries to make an impact there in your weather. South Central temperatures holding close to freezing, just about 40 in Kodiak. Southeast warming considerably into the mid to upper 40s. Some places once again back toward 50 degrees. Upper 30s and lower 40s for the peninsula. 31 in St. Paul, close to 40 for the central chain. And Nome rebounds to about 10. Shishmaref near 0 tomorrow. Kotzebue about 2. Flying weather in the morning, showing IFR conditions in red here across the Beaufort Seacoast and the North Slope, as well as areas in the upper Yukon Valley and the 40-mile country from the the Chugach Range and the Kenai Peninsula down toward the Barren Islands and maybe Kodiak. in the morning, and the Wrangell St. Elias region, as well as Yakutat. Southeast looking pretty good, and IFR from around Kiska or so in the morning. Watch how that shifts eastward, though, and improves for many areas around the Chugach. Prince William Sound, though, still holding on to some IFR, as well as hit and miss around the eastern Alaska range and parts of the coastal plain north and west, it looks like, of Adigan and Anaktuvik Pass. For that, though, the passes themselves right now looking okay. VFR conditions there and for Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass seem to hold on to VFR through most of the day. Rainy Pass looks pretty good at this point. It looks like Windy Pass will lean over toward MVFR conditions throughout the day, with Isabel Pass starting at IFR with some improvement seen through your Friday. Mentasta Pass we're going to list at IFR, as you would expect with snow coming that way. Tanita Pass leans over to MVFR conditions throughout your Friday. And Portage Pass back in IFR as that kind of creeps northward throughout the afternoon. And Chilkoot and White Pass right now look to be visual flight rule for your Friday. Freezing levels show the warm air is winning back across the western Bering Sea, and the warm and wet air is taking over the Gulf of Alaska, but cold air wins the day for the interior, of course, and really most of south central by tomorrow morning. Icing potential is going to increase across the southern Alcan border down towards south central Kodiak Island and along the Alaska Peninsula. That's because that boundary is hovering right over the chain and over south central and into the upper Yukon Valley. As long as it's there, there will be a focus for that moisture and lift, and therefore at least an opportunity for some isolated moderate in that region above 3,000 feet. Maybe 4,000 feet as you get out toward the Kodiak Island region, and watch out for a smaller area across the central Beaufort Seacoast from Point Barrow eastward above 2,000 feet for tomorrow. The jet stream shows our low pressure system across the Gulf. A little bit of lift happening with that. High pressure is starting to drop back into the eastern Bering Sea, and we have forcing from that colder air zipping across the central and northern interior, about 65 to 80 knots or so. The main storm track, though, still well south of Alaska. You can see the weakness here showing up across south central in the Susitna Valley. That's helping to encourage snow growth there across the Alcan border. Low pressure across the central and western chain, really not much to write home about there. And you can see our cold pool of air pushing winds down into the Bering Strait about 20 to 30 knots. Winds are fairly light across the southeast at 3,000 feet tomorrow, with low pressure across the Gulf, more of an easterly flow there, and stronger northeasterly setting up in this weather picture. With winds around 20 to 35 knots or so at 3,000 feet for the north slope. We're watching turbulence across the western Brooks Range. Below 4,000 feet, watch for some occasional moderate there across the western tip as you head out toward Red Dog Mine, and below 4,000 feet from Kodiak Island down toward Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, and Nikolsky, and below 4,000 feet outside of the Copper River Basin. Some of that could reach occasional moderate, a little bit of chop out across the central and western chain as well. We'll check the sea ice edge and your marine weather forecast here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
The 2016 Equinox Super Scoochie.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We have two exciting astronomical events happening next week, and one not so exciting.
That's right, James. This coming Sunday morning, March 20th, 12:31 a.m. is the vernal equinox, the official beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere. And this coming Monday, March 21st, we get to experience a super scoochie between the moon and the planet Jupiter.
The third event is a lunar eclipse, but it's not a spectacular blood moon eclipse like the ones we've been experiencing the past 2 years. This one is what we call a penumbral lunar eclipse, and it isn't nearly as exciting.
What are we talking about? Let's show you.
So what does the term vernal equinox really mean? Let's not forget that the first day of spring is really an astronomical event, which marks one of the 2 days of the year when our sun is smack dab on the celestial equator. The other day being the first day of autumn. When this happens in September, we call it the autumnal equinox, and when it happens in March, we call it the vernal equinox.
Most people today don't keep track of the sun and its movements throughout the seasons like our ancestors did, but it's a lot of fun to watch the sun change its place on the horizon every day from equinox to equinox.
Starting next week, if you make a note of where the sun rises and sets on the horizon each day, using landmarks like trees or buildings, you'll notice that the sun will rise just a little bit farther north of east each day and will set a little bit farther north of west each day.
The sun will continue moving northward week after week until June 21st, the first day of summer, when it will rise its farthest north of east and set its farthest north of west.
Now, if watching the sun rise due east and set due west wasn't excitement enough, check out the moon the night of Monday, March 21st. Okay, we have our skies set up for Monday night, March 21st at 9:30 p.m., your local time, facing east. High in the east, you'll see a pattern of stars that resembles a backwards question mark. This marks the head of Leo the lion. Below that, you'll see a triangle of stars that marks his tail.
Just to the right of this triangle is a sight that'll be hard to miss, the close pairing of the waxing gibbous moon and the giant planet Jupiter. Cue the music.
We call a close pairing of two or more celestial objects a conjunction. And in this particular conjunction of the moon and Jupiter, the two objects are approximately 2.5 degrees or 5 full moon widths apart.
Okay, the third astronomical event happening next week is what we like to call a non-event. But as astronomers and communicators of science, we would be remiss if not mentioning it.
Remember how in 2014 and 2015 we had 4 total lunar eclipses back to back? Well, the moon will be passing through Earth's shadow again on the morning of Wednesday, March 23rd, but this time only through the penumbra.
Unfortunately, when the moon passes only through the penumbra, you barely notice anything happening. What are we talking about? Let's show you.
Here's how eclipses work. Celestial bodies cast 2 shadows, a darker inner shadow called the umbra, and a lighter outer shadow called the penumbra. The moon's position with respect to these shadows will determine the type of eclipse you can see.
First, the moon must be in the full phase, putting the Earth between the sun and the moon. The moon's orbit is tilted by about 5 degrees with respect to the Earth's orbit around the sun, so the alignment isn't always perfect. Most months, the moon misses both shadows completely.
Unfortunately, the moon will only pass through the Earth's penumbra this time around, so we'll only see a slight dimming of the moon, which peaks at about 7:47 Eastern Daylight Time after the moon sets for those of us on the east coast of the U.S.
But for those of you who live on the west coast, the moon will be visible during the peak of this eclipse, which again is almost unnoticeable even to the most experienced moon watcher.
So instead, check out the super scoochie between Jupiter and the moon on March 21st.
And happy vernal equinox.
Keep looking up.
A quick and diligent check of the Sea Ice Desk's forecast today shows that ice has dropped a little bit further south from St. Matthew. You can see a large lower concentration area south of the island, but other than that, no major changes. Remember though, we're going to be watching Bristol Bay as we head into the weekend and certainly into early next week for more ice growth, assuming that big chunk of cold air starts dropping down the west coast of Alaska. You can check the forecast anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice.php. Here's a look at the forecast for southeast now. Northerlies will remain light through Lynn Canal and into Stevens Passage, about 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Southeasterlies at 15 with 3-foot seas there tomorrow. And an offshore flow from Cross Sound and Gustavus out toward Yakutat, 25 to 30 knots with a 12 to 14-foot sea. Southeasterlies south of Sitka to Craig on 25 knots from the south and east. No major change there tomorrow, but you can see southeasterlies run up the outer coast on Saturday with 12 to 13-foot seas on a 25 to 30-knot wind. Northeasterlies coming through the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, about 15 to 20 tomorrow. Seas come up a little bit more to 4 feet with an easterly flow through Clarence Strait on 20 knots for Saturday in southeast. For South Central, northerlies are coming down Cook Inlet, about 15 to 25, pick up even more west of the Barrens to 30 knots with a northeasterly flow. Inside of Shelikof Strait with a 9-foot sea on 35 knots. East and northeasterly winds coming around the western Gulf and light winds still inside Prince William Sound, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Look for those to turn to the east on 20 knots there on Saturday with a 4-foot sea. More of a variable flow for now, south of Resurrection Bay and into the eastern Barrens at 10 knots. And into Kodiak Island is an easterly wind, 15 knots with a 12-foot sea. Northeasterlies continue inside Cook Inlet at 15 to 20 and 20 knots west of the Barrens into Shelikof Strait with a 5-foot sea for Saturday. For the Alaska Peninsula, that broad northeasterly flow continues inside of Bristol Bay and along the peninsula, 30 knots there with a 7 to 13-foot sea along the Bering Sea coast and 16 to 17-foot seas for the Pacific coast. On Saturday, a little bit of a shift there from Castle Cape to Chignik, 20 knots with a 12-foot sea. Otherwise, winds remain from the north and east up to 25 knots there inside of Bristol Bay with a 5-foot sea on Saturday. For the Aleutians, look for a lot of opposing flow here. We have a north and easterly flow in the eastern chain, more of an east to west wind across Atka to Adak, 20 to 30, and northwesterlies from Kiska to Attu with a 9-foot sea on Friday. By Saturday, things start to pop back into alignment here with a north and easterly wind developing and wrapping into a stronger low pressure system in the south. 25 to 30 in all areas with 9 to 11-foot seas for the central and eastern Bering Sea coast regions, and about 13 to 14 for the Pacific coast, and 9 to 12-foot seas out in the west on that northerly flow for Saturday. For the west coast, northeasterlies will continue for Friday. Looks like 25 to 30 over the ice. 11-foot seas there in the open water around St. Matthew, and 30 knots coming off of the Kuskokwim Bay and the Pribilofs with a 8 to about 12-foot sea there on Friday. That diminishes a little bit on Saturday. Northerlies, though, start to move in. 25 to 30 knots along the coast and 25 to 30 out in the west with 7-foot seas around St. Matthew and 11-foot seas in the Pribilofs. For the north slope now, 15 to 20 knots around the Beaufort, more of a westerly flow around Kaktovik, and north and easterly winds coming down the Chukchi Sea. 20 to 35 at their highest. As we get into Friday, there's a look at Saturday, and 20 to 30 knots coming down the western coast with more of a northeasterly flow at 20 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast on Saturday. And again, all of that is moving colder air further and further south. Here's a recap of tonight's weather. Snow is setting up across the 40-mile country in the upper Tanana Valley, as well as the eastern Alaska Range in the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings have been posted. For some areas east of Delta Junction, you could be looking at about 4 to 7 inches. If you're south of Chicken, you could be looking at 8 to 12. And as you head out around Eagle and areas east from Fairbanks, you could be looking at 1.5 feet. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Arctic Wire Rope and Supply, an Alaskan company providing lifting and rigging products since 1983. Manufacturing custom wire rope, chains, and nylon slings here in Anchorage. On the web at arcticwirerope.com.